a group of young rugby players defies the odds by surviving a plane crash in the desolate Andes Mountains.
I was so happy I was alive. I mean, I survived.
They are miles from civilization and from help.
We look around and we don't see nothing, only mountains, 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 mountains.
Their only goal is to return to their families alive.
I turned myself into a survival machine. I didn't want to die.
Confusion. My priorities were rearranged that day.
So we watched 15 seconds.
It will never leave my mind.
Tonight on Minute by Minute, the 1972 Andes survivors. October 12, 1972, Montevideo, Uruguay, 6 a.m. It's a beautiful spring day in the capital city. In Carrasco, a well-to-do neighborhood 20 minutes from downtown, members of a local rugby team are getting ready to fly to Santiago, Chile for a match and a 5-day vacation. 20-year-old Nando Parado is at his home packing to leave for the Carrasco airport. The shy Nando is known throughout Montevideo both for his exceptional rugby skills and his loud motorcycles.
I was very quiet, but on a motorcycle I had like two different personalities, you know? And I was very aggressive on the bikes.
In order to make the trip affordable, the team has chartered a plane from the Uruguayan Air Force. They have sold the extra tickets to family and friends. Nando's mother, Eugenia, and 18-year-old sister, Susana, are accompanying him on the trip.
My father drove us to the airport, kissed my mother, my sister, and he said, I'll pick you up on Monday. Have a nice weekend.
One of Nando's teammates, 19-year-old Roberto Canesa, is already at the airport. Canesa, who is in his second year of medical school, has earned the nickname Musculo, or Muscles, both because of his physical strength and his headstrong nature. He's looking forward to the trip.
The year before, we had gone to Chile and had been great. And the girls in the street, you would just say hello to someone never met, and she say, where are you from?
Canesa's girlfriend of 3 years, Laura Soraco, does not share his enthusiasm.
They were going to play rugby and see the girls in Chile and all the girlfriends in Uruguay. We were quite annoyed because they were leaving.
20-year-old Soledad Gonzalez drops her fiancé, Jose Luis Inciarte, off at the airport. Everyone calls Jose Coche, a childhood nickname.
Coche had those eyes that were always moving like stars, you know, like twinkle always. We were planning to get married in a few months.
Like many of the boys, Coche is an avid smoker. He's well prepared for the shortages of socialist Chile.
In Chile, it was empty of all kind of things, sort of things. And we took to our friends in Chile a lot of cigarette boxes because they haven't much more cigarettes.
18-year-old Carlitos Miguel Paez, the team clown, is one of the youngest boys on the trip.
I was 18 and always fighting with my father, joking but fighting. I was very spoiled.
Carlitos' father, Carlos Paez Vilaro, is a well-known painter in Uruguay.
Carlitos Miguel was a rebel, like all teenagers at that age. Here in Uruguay, we call it the age of foolishness. But he was more than just my son. He was my friend.
The boys board a Fairchild F-227, a twin-engine turboprop manufactured 2 years earlier in the United States. Because the weather in Chile is warm, the boys have packed lightly. They're all dressed in short-sleeve shirts and light sport jackets. The Fairchild takes off and heads west toward Chile. On board are 40 passengers and 5 crew members. Their route will take them on a 900-mile flight path across the Andes Mountains. As the Fairchild approaches the Andes, pilots receive news that cyclone-force winds above the mountains will make it impossible for them to make the crossing that day. The pilot lands the plane in Mendoza, Argentina, 100 miles from Santiago. the boys spend a quiet night in the city.
We had very little money, so if we spend it on Mendoza, we wouldn't have it for Chile.
Although the turbulence over the Andes is still strong, the Fairchild's pilots decide that their sophisticated plane will be able to manage the crossing. Pilots take off from the Mendoza airport. The perils of the flight are far from the boys' minds.
When you're that age, you're immortal, you have everything for yourself, and we owned the world.
The Fairchild's pilot radios in to Santiago Air Traffic Control, reporting that the plane has passed Curicó, a town in Chile on the western edge of the mountains. What no one knows is that the pilot is badly mistaken. In fact, the plane is still in the middle of the Andes, which are obscured by a thick bank of clouds. Here, radar signals are weak, making the navigational instruments on the control panel highly inaccurate. As the pilots lower the Fairchild to 15,000 feet, it comes into contact with the turbulent mountain air. The plane bounces in the sky. Nando Parado is sitting next to his best friend, Panchito Abal.
I think I can remember looking into Panchito's eyes and that there was something wrong.
The plane hits an air pocket and takes a steep dive. The boys look out the windows and see that they are flying right next to the mountains.
Someone said, aren't the mountains too close?
You see the black and white mountain very near to the wing.
The pilot saw the mountains at the same moment.
I heard from the pilot's cabin somebody saying, power to the engines.
The plane trying to climb and shaking.
I asked, do you know why we are going so down?
It's too late to stop their descent. The plane slams into the side of a mountain. The right wing and tail are ripped from the fuselage.
All the seats went forward, and when I feel the cold, I began to realize that we were in a crash.
2 crew members and 3 passengers fall hundreds of feet out of the plane. In his seat, Nando Parado is knocked unconscious.
I just banged my head against something and splat.
The plane careens into another peak, shearing off the left wing and leaving just the fuselage hurtling through the air.
The Catholic, we have 3 normal players. I say, if I choose the longest, I won't finish it. If I choose the little one, it's too short. And so I choose the Hail Mary because it's on the middle.
I remember someone say, Jesus, Jesus, don't leave me. And Carlitos was praying Hail Mary, and I was waiting just for the final moment.
But the plane doesn't crash. Instead, it slams down on a steep slope and skids 1,000 feet across the snow. Wind and snow whip through the cabin, and 2 more boys fall out. Carlitos is still praying.
When I finish, the plane stopped.
Stop it like if you put your brakes in the car, and everybody went into the front of the plane.
I was so happy I was alive. I mean, I survived.
The plane has come to rest in a valley. 13 passengers and crew have been killed, and the 32 survivors are in desperate straits. They are alone in the middle of the forbidding, snow-swept Andes. October 13th, 1972. The Argentinian Andes, 3:26 p.m. A chartered plane carrying members of a Uruguayan rugby team, along with their friends and family, has just crashed in a remote section of the Andes. 13 people have been killed. 32 have survived. Roberto Canesa is dazed but unharmed.
When I went out of the plane, I felt the indifference of the environment. It was completely peaceful, snowing slowly there. You couldn't look far away. And I thought how these mountains can be without feelings and not realize what's going on.
Carlitos Paez extricates himself from the tangled wreckage.
I find Canesa and I ask him, is it anybody dead? He say, a lot of people.
Their friend, Coche Enciarte, is alive and uninjured.
my mind was very clear what I was seeing and said, oh, this plane has crashed in the middle of the Andes.
Canessa, who was in his second year of medical school, begins helping the wounded.
Some of them were telling me they were blind, that he couldn't see, and that not to leave him.
Nando Parado has been knocked unconscious and seems near death. The boys drag him out into the snow and leave him with the bodies of the dead. Nando's mother was killed on impact. His sister Susana, though alive, has sustained serious internal injuries. The temperature is below freezing, but the boys are dressed for the warm spring weather of Uruguay, and they have no idea where they are.
We will look around and we don't see nothing, only mountains, 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 mountains.
You were scared to death, let me tell you.
75 miles away, in Santiago, air traffic controllers lose contact with the Fairchild. Their first call is to the Chilean Aerial Rescue Service. Jorge Massa, an officer in the Chilean Air Force, is put in charge of the rescue effort.
Your first thought is that you are representing all the parents of the people that are in trouble.
At the crash site, Roberto Canessa makes his way to the cockpit.
The pilot was the most important person for us. We thought that he knew where we were.
But the pilot is delirious with pain. He insists that the aircraft has passed Curicó, Chile, a town on the western edge of the mountains. Canessa checks the radio in the instrument panel. It's dead. News reports about the missing plane flash across South America. Carlito's father, renowned Uruguayan artist Carlos Páez Vilaro, is at his ex-wife's house in Carrasco when he hears that the plane has disappeared.
I could not believe that Carlitos Miguel, with all the strength and love that I felt for him and the companionship that I had received, did not carry out his happy vacation to Chile.
Páez Vilaro packs his bags and prepares to go to Santiago to join the search for the plane. A few blocks away, Coche Inciarte's fiancée, Soledad Gonzalez, gets the devastating news from a friend.
You've lost your love. You feel something emotionally, but physically you can stand and bear that pain inside you.
As the sun begins to set, the boys crowd into the fuselage with the injured. They huddle together and hold hands to stay warm.
You would get the other guy's heels here and put it under your shoulders, and in the water you could keep warm his feet.
As the night wears on, the boys have to hit each other to keep their circulation going.
You begin to feel the pain in your bones more than in your skin. And you think, well, I'm going to die and I'm going to freeze and that's it.
People were crazy, shouting, many people dying, freezing.
The boys build a barrier of suitcases and snow at the opening of the fuselage to block the wind. They take the covers off the seat cushions and use them as blankets. Lying in the snow outside the plane, Nando Parado clings to life. One of the boys realizes he's alive and drags him back into the fuselage. Several more people have died during the night, including the pilot. Out of the 45 original passengers, only 29 are still alive, yet they remain hopeful.
We were thinking at the very beginning that people were going to come and rescue us immediately.
They take stock of their food supply. They have 3 bottles of wine, 3 bottles of liquor, 13 candy bars, and some dried fruit and nuts. They agree to ration severely, so each boy receives a single square of chocolate and a sip of wine.
It's like a little tiny piece of chocolate. And nothing else, nothing else.
Jorge Massa and his Chilean rescue team analyzed the data from the plane's flight path and realized the pilot had made a mistake when reporting his position. They begin flying over the area where the Fairchild lies. But because the plane is covered in snow, none of the searchers spot it. The boys organize their makeshift shelter. They line the corpses up in the snow several yards away from the plane and take the seats and luggage out of the cabin to make more room. The boys also find a small battery-powered transistor radio. It is a major discovery. They can now listen to the news and keep track of the search for their plane. But the day goes by without rescue. 2 days after the crash, Nando Parado, who has been knocked out in the accident, regains consciousness. He learns that his mother is dead and his sister is dying.
I didn't have time to mourn. For the next 3 or 4 days, the only thing I did was to take care of my sister.
Some of the boys use seat cushions as snowshoes and hike up the valley to look for suitcases with warmer clothes. But because they have had no food for 3 days, they are too weak to get very far. It is the 4th day on the mountain. One more passenger has died. The 28 remaining survivors are running out of food. Eating becomes their main topic of conversation, and each describes his favorite dish.
We spoke every night about eating sugar, the sweetest dish you could prepare, you know, peanut butter with sugar, blended together, and you would put that into your mouth.
And you think about eating the luggage or eating the leather of the luggage or the belts.
The suitcases are chemically treated. You cannot eat them. We tried. There's no way.
Nando jokingly tells Carlitos that he will eat the body of the pilot in order to survive. Carlitos is shocked and tells another of the boys, Adolfo Strauch.
And I say, Adolfo, Nando is crazy. He wants to eat the pilot. And Adolfo told me he's not crazy, and we were thinking the same thing.
A week after the crash, Nando is lying with his sister in his arms when he realizes her body has grown still.
And I said, okay, my mother's dead, my sister is dead, I'm almost dead, but I'm alive. So I'm going to save all my energies, I'm going to save everything that I have. I won't cry, because if I cry, I will lose salt in my tears. And I will need that salt maybe in the future.
He decided he wanted to go back to his father and tell him that not everything was lost.
From then on, I turned myself into a survival machine.
October 21st, 1972, 8 a.m. It has been 8 days since a plane carrying a Uruguayan rugby team crashed in the Andes. There are now 27 survivors living in the fuselage. One of them finds a camera in the wreckage and documents their daily life on the mountain. After more than a week of searching, Chilean Air Force Commander Jorge Massa calls off the hunt for the missing plane.
For us, it's very sad to get to the point where you say, well, there's nothing that we can do.
The survivors are lying together talking when the subject of their dwindling food supply comes up. They have eaten virtually nothing in nearly 10 days.
We were very hungry. The hunger of 10 days is a hunger that you know that if you don't eat, you are lost.
Carlitos looked into my eyes and said, Nando, why are you thinking the same thing that I'm thinking? And I said, how can you know what I'm thinking? And he said, because everybody must be thinking the same thing.
The boys come to realize they have no other choice. To stay alive, they will have to use the bodies of the dead for food.
There's no food, only water. The only way to survive is to have the bodies.
Most difficult part is, of course, the repugnance you feel to someone dead, and having to eat a dead person is horrible. But at the same time, like, I thought I have to do this if I want to stay alive.
Many of the boys are reluctant. Most are Catholic and argue it is a sin to eat human flesh.
But then, like, a light came on and said, what happened if I was dead? And someone wanted to use my body. Okay, I said, I would be proud that someone would be sitting here thanks to my body. They have survived.
Canessa argues that it would be against God's will not to eat. It is their duty to stay alive. One by one, the other boys concede his point. Then they make a promise. If any of them should die, their bodies are to be used as food.
We said, if I die, I will be very proud if you take me and eat me, until someday if you go out from this mountain to my girlfriend, to my mother, to all our friends, that I am inside you now, because I can give you life with my body.
The survivors agree that those who want to will now eat the meat of the bodies lying in the snow.
Your mouth didn't want to open, and you didn't want to chew it, but you had to do it.
The other boys follow.
They bring some pieces of meat, and then you start questioning yourself. I want to know who was this guy.
I got used to it very, very easily, because my mind was fighting against things that were more important.
Coche Inciarte is unable to overcome his revulsion and declines the meat.
At first it was very difficult for me to live with that terrible thing.
The boys decide not to eat the bodies of their relatives or their close friends. Now that they have a food source, they will need fresh water. One boy devises a way to melt snow using metal from the plane and bottles found in the wreckage.
We had to melt snow like for 2 hours to get a glass of water, and the water would taste horrible.
The next day, two boys are sitting outside the plane listening to the radio when they hear that the search has been called off.
For the first time in my life, I felt I was really on my own. I was scared before, but then I was really scared. It's like a physical fear that you feel in your stomach, you know? It's doesn't go away.
Fernando, the news is a turning point. He decides that they will have to take action to survive.
I didn't want to die. I thought that I was too young to die then. And every action, every effort, every thought from that moment on was to survive. I was always looking at the mountains to the west. I knew I had to climb those mountains.
He tells the boys that he will hike to Chile, even though he has no idea how many miles through the treacherous Andes he would have to trek to make it to civilization. Roberto Canessa volunteers to come with him.
I enjoyed challenge, and I liked the idea that I could do it. I mean, I enjoyed thinking that maybe we could bring them a helicopter back.
Carlitos Paez believes that the world has not forgotten them.
I was thinking that my father, he was looking for me. He was an adventure man.
Carlos Paez Vilaro is indeed still looking for his son.
The first feeling I had was that Carlitos could not let me down.
He rides on horseback into the western edge of the mountains. He does not know that he is just a few miles from the valley where the plane sits. The boys are beginning to grow concerned for Coche Inciarte, who has refused to eat human flesh. His friends know that if he does not eat, he will die. At the urging of the group, Coche finally gives in.
They pressure me when we have our portion daily. Sometimes I want to change it for a box of cigarettes. Some friends say, no, you have to eat it all.
The boys have found a way to stay alive. But the mountains have another harsh test in store for them. October 27, 1972, the Andes Mountains. It has been 2 weeks since a plane carrying 45 people, including members of a Uruguayan rugby team, crashed in the Andes. Search and rescue efforts have been called off. The 27 survivors are keeping themselves alive by eating the bodies of their dead companions. Most days, the boys dry the flesh in the sun on the top of the plane before eating it. Sometimes they make a small fire, using wood they found in the plane and paper money for fuel. Because the harsh sun is burning their skin, the boys paint their faces with lipstick and makeup they find in the women's handbags.
Someone said you look like a decadent prostitute, you know? And it was very funny to And they will begin cheating. How much would you charge me? And I'm sure you wouldn't get any customer, and you would look horrible.
The band of survivors begins preparing Nando Parado and Roberto Canesa to hike out of the mountains. The two boys are given the best places to sleep, the warmest clothing, and the biggest portions of human meat. They decide to leave in 2 weeks' time, when summer begins in the southern hemisphere. The survivors are resting in the fuselage trying to sleep. Suddenly,
we were like lying like this, and then we hear a tremble in the snow.
And at the same time, a great flash.
An avalanche tears down the mountainside. Those who are lying down are buried as snow fills the plain.
I couldn't move my fingers, my arms, nothing. It's like having 100 tons of concrete on top of you. You cannot move.
One of the boys happens to be standing when the avalanche hits, and he begins to dig furiously for his friends. He first uncovers Carlitos Paez.
We start digging and looking for all the boys, like crazy.
Somebody scratched my face, and a cold blow of air went into my lungs, and I heard, "Who are you? Who are you?" I heard somebody calling and say, "I'm Nando, I'm Nando."
The boys claw through 3 feet of snow to the surface, only to discover that the avalanche has been followed by a fierce blizzard. They huddle in the buried fuselage and wait for the storm to break. 8 people have been killed. There are now 19 survivors. 2 weeks pass. The informal society that has formed among the boys keeps them going.
We continue with our jobs, you know, to melt in the snow, having, you know, and to be there. To be there was a job.
Nando and Canesa attempt to hike out and on their way find the tail of the airplane. But the weather is still too cold for them to continue, and they return to the fuselage 2 days later.
We felt that our huge efforts were completely useless because there wasn't a way to go. Feeling lost, feeling cold, feeling forgotten. We were going to die very slowly.
I saw the way my friends were moving, their faces, their eyes, their clothes. And I said, if I look something like they look, we are in a very, very deep trouble. They look like walking dead.
The boys have grown emaciated, and their health is failing. One survivor, Coche Enciarte, has begun to hallucinate. He is convinced there is an escape hatch in the plane.
He said, guys, there is a door here. There's a door and I'm going out. I think there is a valet and I'm going to buy some Cokes, some beverages. Anybody wants anything? I think everybody started to say, yeah, bring me 2 Cokes, some pizza for me.
While Coche fights for his life, his fiancée, Soledad Gonzalez, seeks refuge with friends in Argentina. Devastated and grieving, she writes Coche a letter.
I wrote that I don't want to live without him, that if he was not going to return, please to take me with him.
The weather has grown warmer. The boys pressure the expeditionaries to leave, but Canesa insists that the sleeping bag they are preparing for the trip is not yet ready.
The boys in the plane were suing them horribly and saying that I was just trying not to get out because I was scared. I was just telling them, we'll go when it's ready. I'm the one sleeping in the sleeping bag, so I want to know it correctly sewn.
Nobody wanted to leave the safe environment that you had on the fuselage. I mean, what if somebody found us there, if a helicopter or a plane flying over? It was a very tough decision.
9 weeks after the crash, Nando and Canesa prepare to leave the fuselage for their hike across the mountains. They use seat cushions for snowshoes and a metal pole for a walking stick. They are carrying socks full of human meat. Before he leaves, Nando takes Carlitos Paez aside.
He told me, Carlitos, if you need to eat my mother and my sister, you just do it. You do it. He don't need to say it, but he said it.
On the 3rd day of their journey, Nando and Canesa reach the summit of the mountain to the west of the fuselage, expecting to see the green valleys of Chile on the other side. Nando arrives first and scans the horizon.
360 degrees around, turning around, what I saw were snow-covered peaks, snow and snow and snow and snow and snow and snow.
His heart sinks, but as the boys look out over the landscape, Nando points to two mountains where the snow looks thinner. Even though he believes it will take them 50 days to get there, he tells Roberto that they must head in that direction.
I said, Nando, that's 200 kilometers from here.
I said, Roberto, I'm not going to die here. I'm not looking into your eyes and dying. We cannot go back to the airplane. Let's die walking to the west.
He had something supernatural in his head that was driving him. There was the need to go back to his father.
The two boys soldier on. They have no idea where they are or where they are going.
We walked and climbed and crossed crevasses and glaciers and rivers and rocks and boulders and whatever you can imagine that exists on one of the most hostile environments in the world.
7 days into their trek, Nando and Canesa turn a corner and suddenly find themselves at a place where the snow ends.
For me, that was the line of life and death because I always thought I was going to die in the snow.
The boys who have remained at the plane continue their daily routine, but they are giving up hope.
I saw other faces, and their eyes were empty.
It is the 9th day of the two boys' journey. They have walked more than 40 miles through some of the steepest and most rugged terrain in the Andes. Canesa's health is deteriorating. He is so weak he can barely walk. They come to a wide river. As Nando searches for wood to make a fire, he sees a man on horseback.
The moment I saw him was the first moment that I felt I could be saved.
It is a Chilean shepherd named Sergio Catalan, who is herding his animals through the mountain. Nando yells for help. Catalan cannot hear him over the roar of the rushing river. The shepherd assumes the haggard young men are a pair of lost hunters. With night fast approaching, he signals that he will come back for them the next day.
He said tomorrow. And for us, there was a huge relief. I mean, we had evidence that they're going to rescue the next day. And the men threw us some pieces of bread which we shared. It was incredible.
The next day will bring rescuers, and the entire world will learn of these boys and what they did to survive in the Andes. December 21st, 1972, the Andes Mountains. It has been 70 days since a plane carrying a Uruguayan rugby team crashed in the mountains. 16 young men have survived by living in the fuselage. 2 of them, Nando Parado and Roberto Canesa, have left the plane to search for help. After walking for 10 days, they've reached the Los Maitenes Valley, where they've been found by a Chilean shepherd named Sergio Catalan. They are taken to a hut a mile away, where they feast on cheese, fresh milk, and 4 plates of beans.
Ate everything that they were cooking there, and immediately we felt much better. Then we knew we were safe, but our main problem were our friends.
Catalan sets off on the day-long horseback ride through the foothills to get help. Coche Inciarte's girlfriend, Soledad Gonzalez, is at home when she hears reports that 2 boys have walked out of the Andes. She doesn't yet know whether Coche is still alive.
I was so tired of always hoping and having no results that I went to my room and I stayed there. And I didn't tell this to anybody.
The news spreads throughout South America, and the press heads towards the foothills of the Andes to see if the rumors are true. Chilean Air Force Commander Jorge Massa is preparing to fly a transport plane from Santiago to Argentina when he gets a call.
We heard that 2 survivors has appeared. At first with doubt, but after we receive a message from the army, then we say, well, this is serious.
The 14 boys remaining on the mountain wake up, turn on the radio, and hear that their friends have made it to safety.
We start laughing and screaming and shouting. I get prepared. I use my gel in my hair, and I take my beer off, and I was prepared.
40 miles away, in Los Maitenes, Nando and Canesa are just finishing breakfast when a crowd of reporters appears in the distance. They have walked all night to get a first glance at the survivors.
These people approaching all covered with mud to the waist and then ties and cameras.
En este momento me siento casi feliz.
Tenía a mi madre y a mi hermana que lamentablemente fallecieron en el avión.
The two boys answer their questions, but leave out the details of what they ate to survive on the mountain. Jorge Massa lands one of 3 rescue helicopters in Los Maitenes. As Air Force doctors examine the boys, one of the pilots tells Nando that he will need his help finding the wreckage of the plane.
And I said, I don't want to go on that helicopter. I mean, I'm saved. I don't want to fly on anything again. Anything, any flying machine, I want it far away from me. I don't know how I found myself strapped on that helicopter and say, okay, this is it, let's go.
Nando directs the pilot to his friends. The helicopter only has room for about half of the survivors. The pilots promise to return later, and 6 boys, among them Coche and Ciarte, climb aboard. The pilots lift off from the mountain, battling the thin air and heavy winds. The boys are all frightened.
We climbed to the helicopter and almost crashed to the mountains, the helicopter, because it was a very, very windy day. When I opened my eyes, I saw the green trees of Chile, and the sky was blue. And we felt that that day was the most beautiful day.
I come from the helicopter and Carlitos embraces me. You know, we were so weak that we just fell down on the grass. And those are moments that will be engraved in my mind forever. No?
Carlitos Paez sees his father for the first time in 2.5 months. The survivors are rushed to the hospital in San Fernando. Dr. Jose Aucin is the physician in charge of emergency medicine. His first patient is Coche Ciarte.
He came in on the stretcher. I said hello, and he grabbed my hand and would not let go.
The doctor asks Coche some standard admitting questions and tries to remain calm when he hears the answers.
The doctor who was watching on my leg says to me, what was the last you ate? I said, human flesh.
The doctor tries to act as if he is not taken aback by Coche's reply.
But on the inside, I felt my whole stomach turning. It was a tremendous shock hearing this news.
Dr. Aucin contacts Father Andres Rojas, a 26-year-old priest working in the chapel at the hospital.
I asked myself, God, what can I say?
Rojas speaks with several of the survivors about how they have eaten the bodies of their dead friends. Many of the boys ask if they have sinned. Rojas assures them that they have not.
It would have been a sin for them to let themselves die. It would have been suicide.
The doctors and the priest agree to keep the boys secret. The survivors decide that they will tell the public about what they have done, but they will wait until they return to Uruguay. Nando Parado's sister and father arrive at the hospital. They do not yet know if Nando's other sister, Susana, and his mother, Eugenia, have survived.
And I saw my father coming by the corridor. And I walked like 3 or 4 paces, and he walked, and we just embraced. And that's when he said, is she alive? Are they alive? I mean, and I had to say no.
Roberto Canesa's parents, along with his girlfriend, Laura Sirocco, also arrive at the hospital.
My girlfriend jumped over my bed and I felt invaded because in my dreams I was supposed to go back to her house and knock at the door. And she was there. I mean, when you're a mountain man, things happen very slowly.
He was speaking about God all the time, saying that God has been helping him so much.
Soledad Gonzalez greets her fiancé, Coche.
He was very, very thin. When I saw him, I didn't say a word to him. We just embraced each other and we cried.
The next day, the rest of the boys are rescued and all are taken to Santiago. The international press surrounds them.
People say, all of you were all so courageous, so, you know. No way. We were so afraid. And I think courage comes from fear. I was so afraid that I dared to do things that I wouldn't have dared any other way.
Newspapers across South America publish gruesome photos of body parts near the plane, explaining how the survivors have eaten the flesh of their dead friends. The boys fear that the world will believe the worst, that they killed the others to stay alive. They want to make sure that the public knows the truth. The boys arrive at Stella Maris College in Uruguay, where they've agreed to give a press conference for reporters from around the globe.
We said, okay, let's break the news and tell everybody what happened.
Each survivor speaks, telling a different part of the story. When they finish, the audience bursts into applause.
It was incredible. Nobody wants to ask nothing. They were so touched by the story.
Eight months to the day after the boys' rescue, Soledad and Coche are married.
I was walking with my father through the aisle. I remember I saw Nando. I thought at that moment that I owe him so much.
I owe to them everything, because in those 4 legs that climb and descend the mountains, they were carrying me with them.
Today, most of the survivors still live in Carrasco, Uruguay. They are all in close contact. Coche Enciarte owns a large dairy farm. Carlitos Paez works in advertising. Roberto Canesa married Laura Sirocco and is a pediatric cardiologist. Nando Parado produces television shows about the fast cars and motorcycles he still loves. Relatives of those whose bodies were used for food say they hold no ill will toward those who lived. The survivors feel that their dead friends live on in spirit. Together, they've even made the long, hard journey back to visit the mountain, where their friends' graves still lie.
I think God appears when you don't have nothing. I used to say that I will change all my money to spend one more night feeling this presence of God.
I remember many championships we won and hugging the parents of my friends that died. This is a community and we help each other, and this is one of the treasures of Uruguay as a country. That friendship is one of that let us survive and endure what we have to endure.
I have beautiful memories of my family, my friends. I remember them with great tenderness, but I live my life. And I think I live my life in memory of my friends.